What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Black and Diagnosed. I'm your host, Gerron Scott. I just want to welcome you into the garden. The world is heavy, and we are constantly out here performing, trying to prove we got it all together. But right now, you can drop the act, take off the mask. If you're navigating mental health, holding it down for someone who is, or just out here trying to find your footing, you belong in this room. Let's find the words, name what hurts, and get our rhythm back. Pull up a seat, and let's talk. Welcome back to Black and Diagnosed. We're here with Richard Davis. We're going to let him introduce himself.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm Richard. I'm happy to be here. Appreciate you having me on your podcast, Gerron. I'm Richard. I'm from Virginia, outskirts of Richmond, small county called Louisa County. A lot of people don't hear about it, but country boy, living in Richmond, Virginia, working in the mental health field, and I just recently finished my master's in social work, and so that's kind of what connects me to the mental health field, but also there's some personal connections as well that I'm excited to talk about today.
So let's talk about Louisa County. I was in Richmond for 7 years. I never even heard of that. Where exactly is that?
So if you're ever going towards, a closer city to is Charlottesville, where the UVA, so like going 64 West. So Louisa's like smack dead in the middle of Charlottesville and Richmond. So like perfect in between.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's very rural.
I'm going to ask an ignorant question. Did you grow up on a farm?
That's not an ignorant question. Won't say farm per se. My grandparents, when I was before I was born, they owned a farm, and they had the ducks, the horses, the cows, all those things. But then, as I came into the world, all those things were no longer. My grandparents got old. My mom, I think she was the last of her. She was the last of her siblings, and so she got to witness the tail end of it. But by the time we came along, we just saw the old barn houses and the old tractors that had grass growing up around them. But it was still a lot of field. I think my grandparents owned about 15 acres of land. Yeah.
Nice. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, very urban, no farmland, whatsoever in the city. So it's always interesting when I go to rural places and see what it's like. I always get a kick out of it.
It's a whole different experience. I think a lot of people out here nowadays, they're like, I can't wait to retire and move to the country and things like that. And I'm like, I grew up in that area. I do not want to go back. I actually, part of that land that my grandfather, owned and purchased, he split up amongst his children. And then I was able to purchase a few acres from my mom, from my uncle and my mom. But that's there, and I have no desire to use it as of right now, but I always was taught that land is something good to have, for the future. So who knows what may come down the road, but I'm enjoying I wouldn't say Richmond's a big city, but it's the perfect in-between of a big city and a more rural area.
I really loved my time in Richmond. I think it's the perfect city for someone in their 20s. It's like in their early 30s as well. I think how can I put it? It's not a big city, but it's not a small city either. There's lots to do. And it's really just, honestly, the perfect size city. Like, if you want to go out, you can. If you don't want to go out, you don't have to. You're never forced to do something. It's affordable. It's near DC. It's not that far from New York. Not that far from anywhere.
I think it's the perfect in between because, like, your Richmond smack there, you go 2 hours north, you're in DC. 4 hours south, you're in Charlotte. And New York is 8 hours north. Atlanta's 8 hours south. So it's like perfect. I'm not saying that you're going to drive that, especially in 30s and 40s. Driving 8 hours is insane. But catching a quick flight. Richmond Airport isn't the cheapest when it comes to quick flights, but at the same time, it's not too expensive like it has been in the past. So, yeah. And speaking of airports, today, Tom, it's insane.
Yeah, and RDU is the TSA usually is like 10 minutes, 15 minutes max. So I do miss that of getting through the airport in 10 minutes. So what is your favorite restaurant in Richmond? Let's take that back. If someone's coming to Richmond and they're spending a day with you, where are you taking them in that full
Ooh,
day?
you talking my language now. So Richmond is known for a lot of the food. I, I would call it the food capital of the world, but it's not the food capital of the world, but it has a restaurant for everything. And then of course festivals as well. But if someone came to spend a day with me, I probably so soul food wise, we have the Croaker Spot. If you're looking for like some good fried fish, cornbread, sides that taste like your mom and us, that's the spot that I definitely would take someone to. Outside of that, I'm a very simple guy, and any type of sandwich shop satisfies me. Um, and this is not a local sandwich shop, but and most people that know me know that I'm a avid Jersey Mike's fan. So outside of the home cooked Southern meals, I can go get a sandwich and chop it up with you and enjoy myself.
Nice. I would say my favorite thing about Richmond was the VMFA, Virginia Museum of Fine
Ooh,
Arts. Like I love just going there, walking around, and just taking just taking people there from out of town. Like, hey, you're in town, let's go to VMFA, and they're like, oh, this cool little museum's in the middle of Richmond. I'm like, yeah, it's dope. And the breweries, the
yes,
cideries, the wineries within hour, some of them within 30 minutes. Richmond was just perfectly located. You had the mountains, one direction, the beach in one direction, the city in the
exactly.
other,
People sleep on
DC.
Richmond. That's
It's
why a lot of times when I tell people I live in Richmond, they're like, "Ooh, why don't you live in DC?" I'm like, if you ever come to Richmond, experience it for a weekend, you would fall in love with it. And I would say that Richmond's come a
yeah,
long way, especially when it comes to just people moving back into the city. Because for a while in like the early 2000s, people had left and moved onto the outskirts, like short pump of things, because the inner city had gotten bad. I know that when I was young, growing up in the country and coming to the city, Richmond at an early age, like early 90s things, Broad Street, which is the main strip that goes right through, was jumping. It had a lot of department stores, and there was a lot of black people just doing well for themselves. And all of a sudden, I think there was like a depression that hit the city, and a lot of those stores and things went out west to Short Pump. And as you can see, they have a town center and things like that. But now I can say that Richmond is really coming back, thriving, and a lot of people are moving into the city. A lot of big businesses are coming into the city. So it's a very fun place to be, especially in your early 20s and 30s, if you're looking to build, depending on the industry that you're in. But yeah, Richmond's a great spot.
yeah, I love it. I miss it. I've been out of Richmond for about a year and a half, and people like just moved back, and I'm like,
Come on back.
for the right price, for the
I
right
understand.
price, for the right price. There's a lot of places I would move to for the right
Yeah,
price. So you have ADHD and anxiety, but you also have your master's in
I
social
do.
work. How do those coexist?
Whew. You gotta take a deep breath and think about that. It took a lot of hard work. And I was not saying just like me grinding, studying, or anything like that. Um, Having to go to college, so which is something completely out of my norm. Me and my sister were like first generation uh, college goers, if you per se, but not really having that example before me, like your mind really has to figure things out on its own. And you're 18, coming out the house and not really knowing yourself. It got hard. I wasn't one of those 4-year students. I would say that honestly. There were classes that I had to retake. Uh, Being honest, and not because I wasn't smart. It was because I didn't really understand how my brain worked. And so having anxiety for one, and knowing different scopes of the anxiety, the social anxiety, but then also with ADHD, not being able to focus. I don't know if a lot of people don't know. They see people with ADHD is thinking it's just hyperactivity, but going to class late, oversleeping, those things, and setting every alarm that you could think of, but still somehow being late to class, um, not finding your keys before you leave out the house, those things. So it took me actually realizing, and then I think go back to it. I didn't realize it until I started taking my psychology classes that I had ADHD. I was in like a psych. I think it was like just a full class focused on diagnosing, and we were sitting there, and the professor was going over the different details of ADHD, and I had one of those like moments where I was like, wait, everything he's describing sounds like me. And so from that moment, I actually called my mom and I was explaining to her. And honestly, as I was explaining to her, it sounded like her as well. And we'll talk about that later. Um, and she was like, yeah, your teachers in grade school, they talked to me about you having ADHD, but I didn't really want to hear that because I didn't want them diagnosing my child. And I'm looking at her like, man. And then so I took it upon myself to actually link myself to a psychiatrist. And I sat down with him and I explained some of the things that I was experiencing. And from me explaining a few things like me not being able to sit through a movie and retaining the information, or me sitting in the conversation looking directly at you, but not hearing anything because my mind's just wandering and thinking of other things. He was like, yeah, it sounds like you have ADHD. And from that moment, I had the diagnosis, but I also was prescribed medication. Um, he started me off with the non-stimulant medication, and it had some effect on me, but it also came with a lot of side effects that I didn't like. And so that made me not want to take medication because it made me feel different. But after even going back and talking with him about how I felt, he started me on more stimulant based medication, which changed the game. So I was able to like go back to class, focus, get work done. Not saying it was perfect all the time, but I had a whole different shift in like my thinking. So that's really the story of me even finding out about me having ADHD and also kind of changing my path to kind of focus on finishing school. Cause I think that if I hadn't had that moment, I more than likely would have finished my undergrad that led me to my master's program.
Wow, that's powerful. So let's rewind and talk about self-advocacy. So had you not taken that psychology class, you would not have learned to speak up. But your mom said, well, we kind of knew, but we didn't want to say anything
Exactly.
to anyone because we don't want we don't want a diagnosis because we don't want that in our family.
Exactly.
When she said that to you, how did you feel?
I almost felt betrayed. I was like, man, I've been struggling. And those who know or have ADHD, you know that sometimes you will criticize yourself for like, how did I forget to do that? Or you get fussed at a lot for forgetting things. Like I would be told to do a task, and then moments later, if that task wasn't done right in that moment, like it had caused me to wait, my mind would go to the next thing, and I would forget to do the task that I was told to do if it wasn't something I needed to do right in that moment. So you would get frustrated a lot. So me not knowing what was wrong with me, it just made me feel like I was different.
That sense of being different can take on a whole lot of forms. And for you, it was just like, why can't I get stuff
Yeah.
done? Why can't I concentrate? Why am I not doing well in classes? So once you finally received that diagnosis and you started going back to class, what was that first moment you were like, this is finally working?
So the first moment of actually being on that stimulant medication and going in class, it was like I can actually sit in the front of the class and be okay with it. Typically, I would be in class and I would be the dozer, like not being able to focus, like fall asleep, or I would be the one that would be listening, but like write on paper just random things, not being able to follow along, or the teacher would notice that I wasn't focused and they would call on me, and and then I wouldn't know what they were saying, or I wasn't able to give the right response. So then you would laugh. So that would make you want to avoid even being called on. So, but once I got on the medication, I was able to focus. I was able to follow up and answer the questions that were being asked of me. I was able to write down my homework assignment and put my things away, organized in my bag so that I could find it later on. Like those things really mattered and made a difference. But then also people talk about, how you feel on the medication, but the medication doesn't work all the time. So once the medication goes away, especially if you're on a short acting medication, you're back to that having to remember certain things or trying hard to focus or whatnot. So the medication definitely made a difference as far as me knowing what to get done during that period of time where I am medicated. But at the same time, I also had to put together systems and patterns and things that I still use in this day, even though I'm not in school, to make sure I was able to get things done.
Can you explain what some of those systems and patterns that you do are?
100%. So I have clocks all around my house. One of the aspects or traits of ADHD is time blindness. And so what that means is, say I know that I was supposed to be at work at 8:00 in the morning, and I have every intention to get there at 8:00, but with time blindness, you will not, your mind doesn't process the time in between you getting up, getting out the shower, and getting to work. You just thinking that, okay, I'm going to prepare for the day, and all of a sudden 8:00's here, and you're still at home when you're supposed to be at work. So having clocks around helps me to keep track of the time in between me waking up, me divvying out 15, 20 minutes for a shower, me having my clothes ready, maybe take about 5-10 minutes to iron, and then walking the dogs. So I can keep track of time throughout the day. A watch isn't just enough for me. I have to see it everywhere I turn. So I have clocks in every room, digital, I have analog clocks, whatnot. And that really helps me to stay on track. Another thing that I do, and I do it at work all the time, if I know I have a meeting coming up, I set timers. I'll set the timer for 2 minutes before the meeting starts, just to remind myself that, I have 2 minutes to prepare for something that's coming up, because I can easily get distracted. Beyond that, I think even the fact of having people around you that hold you accountable or remind you, when as soon as I see somebody, hey, remind me at 3:00 that I have to do so and so. Just speaking up and sharing with people, that's a way of setting a system in place to help you stay accountable. So there's many other things that I could think of that I put in place. Some of them, they're in place and I don't think of it anymore because I've been working over so long. But yeah, after I realized that my brain didn't function the way that most others do, like even down to keeping a calendar, I would set out to buy the best agendas at the beginning of the year, thinking that, oh, this year is going to be different. And I would write everything in it. It would look perfect, use color code. And 2-3 months through, not months, I'm sorry, 2, 3, 4 days into the year, that calendar is in my bag. I never pulled it out again. I'm going based off of how I feel. So yeah, so just also a part of your system to better yourself, knowing that you have a diagnosis, is self-awareness and knowing what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah, that's powerful. You mentioned something earlier I wanted to get to. You mentioned side effects. So what were some of the side effects of the non-stimulant and the stimulant medication?
Man. So starting with the non-stimulant, I think it was Strattera that I took. It was stomach aches. I would feel terrible. Like it was almost like I would much rather feel how I felt non-medicated than having these stomach aches throughout the day. I felt, clarity in my mind, but it wasn't full clarity where it was like, this outweighs these stomach aches. So that was the biggest thing with the non-stimulant. But as far as the stimulant medication, and I've tried 2 different ones. I was on Vyvanse initially. My doctor prescribed me, and then I switched over to Adderall. And their side effects were very similar. I think Vyvanse I switched out because I did have headaches as a side effect. But outside of the headaches that didn't last too long, I experienced dry mouth, which is something that, just keep cough drops or anything close by mid to your mouth, because I talk a lot. So it's important to keep your mouth fresh. Other side effects, I would say, now that I think about it, I would say dry mouth is the only one that I experienced. Yeah, so on non-stimulant, other than headaches with Vyvanse, but with Adderall, I think dry mouth is the only one I experienced. But there does come the moment when you're your medication has taken its course and you had to crash. And a lot of people, don't prepare for that. Or I see your face like, which I'm sure you're familiar with it, but the crash is something that early on, I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Because your brain is basically shifting gears. Now it has to go back to its normal functioning, and you're almost like in a time warp where you're like, okay, it's back to Richard that I know unmedicated. But that's when your systems and things come into place to get you through the rest of the day.
Speaking of medication and unmedicated, Richard, are there times when you're just like, I feel fine, I don't need my medication anymore, I can do this without medication?
Absolutely. That's actually a great question. So for me, I gauge me taking my medication on what's going to go on that day. Typically for my work, and I don't think I've shared, I work in crises. So every day is a different day, and I'm presented with different issues. I manage a crisis facility, and so I manage staff. So it's not only me keeping up with things I have going on, I have to keep up with other people's agendas and things. So most days when I'm working, I'm medicated. But however, if there's something where it's like we're doing more activity, we're going out on a retreat or something where it's just more so social, not really requiring much focus, I will choose to not medicate that day just because I want to be in the moment. I want to feel everything. I want to, give, because Richard unmedicated, I'm fine, but unmedicated is more of my more expressive self. So weekends, I'm not medicated unless I'm traveling on a long trip and I want to stay focused on the road or whatnot. So there are days that I'm medicated. I'm fine with that. There are days that I'm not. And I think if you're close to me, you will know the difference. But most people don't even know the difference from day to day.
Interesting. You said you work in crisis. How does your anxiety play a role in that?
So anxiety is funny because I actually learned that I had anxiety far later than I did with ADHD. It was actually at the start of the pandemic where, if you know me, you know that I like to keep my hand on certain things to gauge. I think that comes back from, trauma of growing up and not being able to control so much. And so I won't say that I'm a controlling person, but I like to make sure that things that are around me have a certain order. And so when the pandemic came, I couldn't control a lot that was going on around me. And I started to experience like panic attacks, which I remember having one like years prior, but never labeling it as me having anxiety. But this particular one I was having when I woke up out of my sleep into a panic attack that I thought was a heart attack. Called 911, requested for them to come, though there was no one else around. And by the time I was on the phone with the lady, she told me that the ambulance was outside. Me thinking I had a heart attack, I'm walking myself down the stairs from my 3rd floor apartment to the ambulance. And in my mind, I'm like, if I was really having a heart attack, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. And then me going to the nearby hospital and them running tests on me, checking my heart, checking other things throughout my body, make sure I rule out any other type of medical concern. And then doctors just coming back like everything seems normal. And so I'm like, no, I know what I felt. I know what I feel. And so the nurse, she came in, she closed the curtain, and she smiled at me and real politely she said, hey, she said, I don't think that we're going to do any more tests on you. She said, but have you ever thought about talking to someone about anxiety? And I looked at her like very strange because I've been a mental health professional for almost 10 years prior to that. And I knew what anxiety was, but I never equated it to myself. And so I was like, no, I don't think there's anxiety. But then as soon as she left the room, I started thinking to myself, I was like, wait. And I started putting two together, the, heavy breathing, not being able to control uncontrollable thoughts and all those things. And I was like, I think I am experiencing anxiety. And that's what led me to actually referring myself through my EAP program with my job to see a therapist. And that was in 2020 at the start of the pandemic.
Wow. Again, that self-advocacy seems important. So for the people listening, tell me a little more about that self-advocacy piece. How can they self-advocate?
So as far as me self-advocating and not knowing that I was self-advocating, but at the same time, I think that with the work that I do in the field, knowing your resources is important. For me, I knew that I was connected to an EAP program through my insurance. And what EAP is the Employee Assistance Program. And it offers so many different resources such as counseling, and not just for mental health counseling, but financial counseling, was the litigation counseling, all those type of things. And so, and it offers it for free, for a certain amount of meetings or sessions and such. And then beyond that, your insurance picks up from it. But as far as just even knowing that route to take, is just like you would if you broke your toe or stumped your toe and it broke, you would take yourself to the hospital to get that fixed. It's just important as if you know that something's going on in your mind, you would want to find the right resource or link yourself to a psychiatrist or therapist, or psychologist, to talk with someone about what's going on and then finding that right diagnosis.
Interesting. You mentioned something I want to touch on a little bit. So you had a diagnosis of ADHD, and oftentimes when we find the diagnosis, we believe that's what it is. It has to be just that. And oftentimes it's not just that. One of the things I'm working on with my therapist is this diagnosis of OCD.
Mhm.
I have bipolar disorder, comfortable with that. But she's like, Gerron, I think you have OCD. I'm like, no way. I was like, maybe anxiety. I can see that. She's like, I don't think you have anxiety. I really think it's OCD. These thoughts, the obsessive. I'm like, I don't turn the doorknob 3 times or touch the stove 4 times, then turn around 3 times. And that's ignorance on my
Mhm.
part, because that's like the stereotypical thinking of OCD, the generalization of if you have OCD, this is what you must do. So as a social worker, what are some stereotypes that you see when it comes to mental health diagnoses that you would like to break, especially in the Black community?
Oh yeah. I would even start with myself, and as a lot of young males who are busy, hyperactive, and thinking that, oh, they have ADHD just because they're moving, jittering. That's not always the case. I always tell people to get properly diagnosed. There's screenings, and there's also certain doctors who can perform neurological exams to study. They study the brain to know how your brain is affected through your thoughts. So I would say, don't be so quick to diagnose, but at the same time, pay attention to those signs as well and take them seriously. And then also knowing, especially with ADHD, that females present differently than males. And a lot of times females go undiagnosed for a long time until, mom gets to be middle age and she's not able to manage her household. And they're thinking, it's postpartum depression and things like that. And they're like, no, what's going on? She's been trying to hold it together for so long, because a lot of times girls, when they feel different, they get quiet. As opposed to boys, they feel different. They embrace it. They become disruptive in the classroom and things. So I would say that to pay attention to not just males, but females as well. And I know that we're in this time now where neurodivergent is its own thing. You log on to TikTok or Instagram and you see so many posts about it. And, people are having these awakening moments. But at the same time, I would tell people to go beyond just what they see on social media and actually connect themselves with an actual professional that could provide the diagnoses. And like you said, um, it's a such thing as a dual diagnosis. You could have ADHD, anxiety. You can have bipolar and OCD. And a lot of times, symptoms, the common symptoms that you see, or you say the poster board symptoms, aren't always what it is. You could present, our fixations could be completely different. Different cultures have different ways of thinking. They can present in many different ways. So I would say that don't just take what you see on TV and automatically assume that that's what it's supposed to be presented as.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about the social worker aspect. My sister, she has a LCSW, as I believe you do
Ooh,
as well, working towards it.
correct.
You know, what is one thing that you've seen working with Black people that gives you concern and gives you hope?
It's a good question. I would say in my years of experience with our people per se, I would say a lot of times with working, when I started off in the field, I worked with children, and a lot of times parents would get their children sign up for services without also considering themselves. And I always say that, within, I hate to use this terminology, but I always say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And a lot of times, some mental illness is hereditary. It can be passed down from parent to child. And just knowing from the trauma of our past and slavery and so many different just segregations and traumas that we've had to live through that wasn't far off, it's no surprise that there's a lot of mental health within our community. So I would say that we should be looking at not just pointing fingers at other people for going through things, but also looking at ourselves and making sure that we're intact. It doesn't have to take a panic attack for you to go get therapy. But then on the flip side, within our community, I'm very proud that we're having these conversations and like you using this platform right now to educate others, because I see that there's a rise in our community getting help, being connected to services. I see a lot more Blacks not just being court mandated to see a therapist, but reaching out for themselves and having this open dialogue that 10 years ago would never happen. Even male to male, straight, or what have you, it's a conversation that you see in the barbershop nowadays. When, back in the barbershop, all you talking about is sexualized things and what happened last night or who's walking past and fixate on the bodies. Now we're talking more mental because it can happen to anybody. So I'm proud of our community for rising up and embracing this conversation and people seeking help.
Yeah, I'm so glad the conversation in barbershops moved beyond sports and women.
Exactly.
I love both sports and women, but sometimes it's just like there has to be more to life with sports than women. I'm like, you have a wife, you don't go home and like speak to her like this,
At
right?
all. I think it's like a male thing. Is like that ego, where it's like you think this is what other men want to talk about, and I think that's the reason why a lot of men suffer alone. They don't want to be vulnerable. We're taught in our community, to be strong. If you start crying when you fall, the natural response should be to cry if you're hurting. But what do your cousins, your parents, I'll take them, my grandparents do? Be strong, be tough. Why? My leg is bleeding. So, and that carries on to adulthood.
A lot of my close friends would tell you when I was first diagnosed or going through my diagnosis process, I called them and I cried. Like I didn't know what else to do because
That's healthy.
I would just think back over my life and the mistakes that I've made and the people that I hurt. And I was just like, all I can do is cry. But I've always been one who's been comfortable with myself and my masculinity. I know who I am.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So what caused you to embrace that side of you? I guess, was it your upbringing, your household?
To be honest with you, I became an amputee when I was 9 years old. So I grew up being handicapped. So I viewed the world differently because when you view the world as a handicap, I got made fun of. I was told I was different. So you grow up different.
Yeah.
So one of the things when you grow up different, I never want to make anybody else who's different feel different.
Understood. 100%.
So for me, when Like, why am I going to make someone else feel different when I'm different?
Right.
That's always been my mindset.
I love that. And I didn't know that about you. That's amazing. Because a lot of times I think about my family and I was not a crier because we weren't very affectionate within my household. And you see that in a lot of Black households. We didn't hug. The first time me really learning how to embrace others was like in church. The churches were big on going around and hugging people, and they have the songs "Reach Out and Touch Someone's Hand" and things like that. We didn't do that in my household. So, hearing you say that you okay with crying, so many households or people out in the world they're not, and you see that in the barbershop. So, yeah, I never look forward to going
I
to the
will
barbershop.
not lie. I do not like when a church says reach out and hug somebody. I am not big on hugging people. Unless you're my friend, I hug friends, but strangers, man. In college, people would hug everybody, and I'm just sitting in there. This is probably why people thought I was mean anyway and rude, because I would just stand there and I'm just like, I don't want to hug you. I really don't. Like, I barely know you. Like, I don't want to hug you. I will dap you up. I will high five, but like, you don't smell good, or you got a bunch of perfume on, all this body spray.
Right.
I don't want to hug you. Sorry, West Georgia folks. I did not want to hug you.
I
9
get
times
that.
out of
And
10.
it actually took thinking about it prior to it happening. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to go to church now. And we're gonna get to that part of the service where everybody has to go around and hug each other. And I'll count how many people I would hug. But then after a while, the more that I did it, and the more natural it became, and the more I didn't mind it. But I remember starting off, because I never had that growing up, that it did take some practice. And it wasn't just external practice, it took internal practice, thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the ADHD and anxiety, there's a lot that you have to put to the back of your mind when dealing with clients. How do you do that?
I don't. Well, it depends on how far in the relationship we are, because of course I'm not just immediately forthcoming with my diagnoses of ADHD more so than anxiety. But there's certain parts when as a professional, you fill out and when it's appropriate to self-disclose to maybe help further the relationship between you and the client versus, holding back. And that's something it's taught, but it's more so you have to feel it as well. And if you know that it's going to benefit that client, not just yourself, that's when I do disclose. But at the same time, me managing those things that are still there, me, not wanting to sit down for an hour and process. I have things. I have fidget tools. I make sure that I don't use or have sugar prior to me sitting down and having sessions for hours at a time. And then another thing that I do, with me being mindful of who I am, I'm not the therapist that's going to have clients all day long. I will have a client in the morning, in between other work that I do, maybe one in the afternoon and maybe one in the evening, because I just know my mental load, my mental capacity, and just me wanting to be intentional for the clients that I am working with, that I would never overload my brain to not be able to help someone else.
Nice. I like that. So what does the act of disclosure look like? How does it come up in conversation?
Most of the times when it comes up, it's typically at a crossing point with a client who's struggling to embrace their new diagnoses, or sharing things, or if medication is is coming up and you have a client who may be against medication or saying it doesn't work, or like we talked about earlier with the side effects. Oh, those side effects are crazy. And like I said, when I first experienced side effects with one medication, I went back to my doctor and I told him about it. And we tried something else. And I think a lot of people don't know how the insurance world works. Is they don't start you off with the best medication. They can start you off with the cheapest medication and see how effective it is. And then if you go back and say, oh, we tried this and it doesn't work, we'll try the next tier that will be approved and go from there. And so I think that education alone, and that was just for me being around other doctors and, working alongside prescribers, that I learned that. But people usually give up at the sign of just the first discomfort.
I'm going to ask you to repeat that last part again because I want that in their minds again. Can you repeat that part of insurance
Yes.
will go to the next level?
Mm-hmm.
Can you restate that and how that
Sure. So
works?
there's tiers to how medication is prescribed. And of course, it's prescribed based on diagnoses as well. But at the same time, when you go to a doctor, um, and you're saying that you have signs and symptoms, and doctors, they can't, like my doctor prescribed me a non-stimulant before. And that's more so to monitor to make sure, and it's a liability thing as well. I'm this young college kid, he's here and he's saying that he's experiencing these things from being in a psych course that's telling you all these symptoms. Let's start with the least risk medication first, and then if that doesn't work, we can try and tier up to a stronger but more effective medication, and we'll see where it lies. Because maybe the mid-grade medication may work better than the bottom, but we're not going to go all the way to the top. So there's different tier levels to the medication, but it's important that you go back to your doctor and you share what you're experiencing and the effectiveness of it in order for them to know, because if you don't share it, how are they going to know? And all they see is you being non-compliant without knowing why.
Yeah, I think a lot of people I speak to, they give up
Mm-hmm.
usually at that medication phase. They say to me,
Exactly.
I heard that this happens, or I tried it and this happened to me.
Exactly.
So I'm glad that you explained that. So any listeners that tried medicine or are afraid to try medicine, you can go speak to your prescriber, go speak to your doctor and say, you know what, this is what happened when I took this. Can we try something new?
100%.
So that's great.
Yeah.
That's great to know. So what do you do when you get burned out from all the tasks that you do with your ADHD brain? So what happens?
So that's a great question as well. And I share this all the time. And I share it so much that people look for me to see what I'm going to do next. I take weekend trips. I am a big avid person for an extended weekend trip. A Friday through a Monday is all I need. I'm the type of person, I enjoy going to work. I enjoy doing what I do. And I don't want to take too much time away from me enjoying that part of my life. But at the same time, because I work in the field of crises, where I'm constantly handling extreme situations within the home that I manage, but then also, having other tasks such as therapy, or also offer life coaching as well sometimes. It can be very taxing, and burnout is real. Down from the documentation that we had to do following the sessions, to the incident reports, and a lot of times when you're working in the field of crisis, there's a lot of investigations because things may appear differently than, or you might get some type of false report, and sometimes they're founded reports, but at the same time, that's a lot of burnout and accusations that don't always feel good. So what I do is I take trips. It doesn't have to be far. I don't have to go to the extravagant island or anything like that. I can go to DC for the weekend, find out what's a festival going on there, get away with some friends, go meet up with friends in a different city. I travel up and down the East Coast, been to the West Coast, but it inexpensive, short term, not breaking the bank, but same time trying to enjoy myself, clear my mind, and just get away. That's what I do to try to avoid burnout.
Good. I think it's so important to avoid
For
burnout.
sure.
I don't have much PTO at this job than I did at my old
Yeah.
job, but at my old job, you take a week off every 2
See,
months.
that's why I do the extended weekend so I can preserve a PTO. Especially on a
I used to
holiday
think
weekend. You got to plan it around the holiday weekends.
I love a good holiday, extra day, take it
Exactly.
off. I'm like, what's coming up? Memorial Day?
Uh-huh. We got
Taking an
Easter
extra
Monday coming
Friday
up next
off.
month. I'm already planning around it.
Oh,
Yeah.
nice. So, how do you remind yourself that ADHD and anxiety is not barriers? It's an extra tool in your belt for empathy.
I love that. So I think there was a day when I realized that, because before, I always felt that I was different, but I came to understand that different didn't always mean bad. different meant that I could use it in a different way, and it could be for good or bad. And I chose the good. Um, One thing about my diagnoses of ADHD and anxiety is I can finish tasks far faster than the average person. I used to remember taking tests back in the day in school, and don't get me wrong, I was horrible at studying, but if I crammed everything in right before the test, I would speed through the test like it was nothing and be done and just sitting there. And of course, I would get in trouble for sitting there because now my mind doesn't have anything to focus on. But that was a superpower of mine. And I was successful. I would always wonder how people would, be fearful of tests when they studied, because I would be the one that would wait to the last minute to study, but then always pass tests. And can't say that works for everybody, but I see that as a superpower. Me not me showing up late to a lot of things, but having ADHD and a social anxiety piece, I learned to craft the social anxiety to my benefit, because though I'm late, I would know how to walk into a room as though I was really on time. And sometimes it takes some comedic relief, and you have to read the room first to before you walk in and know whether it's a time to be quiet or the time to make an entrance. And so I would always play that, so everyone knows that Rich is going to be late. And I would always get feedback, like even down to references for jobs by supervisor. I remember her saying to another supervisor, and she repeated it back to me. She said that your previous supervisor said, one thing about Richard, he's going to be late, but when he gets there, he's going to work. And I can truly say that even to this day, even though I have systems around me that make sure that I'm not late to everything. But at the same time, I try to use it to my advantage.
Good, good. So, as someone who's diagnosed with anxiety later in life, when you reflected on your younger self, where do you think there were times when it showed up?
Everywhere. And I didn't share much of this, but I grew up in a religious household. My grandmother and my grandfather, they were like founding members of a church. And of course, my mom grew up in the church and things. And so religion was all around me. And of course, I have my faith that, very strong in my faith. But at the same time, I think the anxiety really stemmed from a lot of things that I learned through church, of me trying to meet a certain mark that honestly, the child, it was unknown, but I just tried to strive for perfection everywhere. So me having ADHD, let's be practical, but also striving for perfection, that produced my anxiety. So then it showed up in all parts of my life. Me trying to walk a certain way to not be critiqued, or me trying to talk or present a certain way, even outside of presenting, but in the world of social media, having the right look, having the right post. With ADHD, you're prone to make mistakes easily when it comes to grammatical errors, misspellings, and not going back to check. So like spending so much time on a simple post that wouldn't really be required of a normal person. Thank God for AI nowadays that can help you right away. But I didn't have that back then. So it showed up in so many different places that created even more and more social anxiety.
You mentioned earlier about you're more of a 90s music person. Top 3 90s artists. Go.
So Usher is one that I would say
definitely
is one of my number one 90s artists. But I'm also a big Whitney fan. Whitney Houston,
okay,
as many people say nowadays, she wasn't supposed to die. I love all of her music, of course, from the late 80s to 90s. And number 3, I would say, I'm thinking early 2000s now. I would say Mary J. You can't go wrong with Mary J. Yes.
There's nothing wrong with Mary J.
And I'm sure I'm going to think of a lot more, because I'm also, now that I think about it, Gerald Levert was my guy. Gerald Levert was my guy. I remember being
I would never expect anyone
Oh
to say
my
Gerald
God.
Levert
I was a young
ever.
guy, a young boy, and I would be listening to his music and wanting to be in love so bad. It'd just be crying almost to the songs.
What was that group he was in?
Yes.
LSG? Or
LSG, but I was more so when he got out of the group Gerald Levert fan.
oh wow.
Yes, sir. Like I give it was it
Wow.
give anything to fall in love. With Boys to Men, End of the Road. Yeah.
In grad school, my grad assistantship, I was a personal
Uh-huh.
trainer. I am not in shape. I can work out, but I was in great shape in like grad school. Now, not so much. So I taught an ultimate abs class, and I would end the song with "I Want to Dance with
But
Somebody" by
that's the
Whitney
best song.
Houston. Just because, like, you can't be mad after that
Yeah.
song comes on.
Oh,
You're like, oh, I feel good. So shout out to Whitney. That
yes.
song's got
That's a
played
party
every
starter,
day
and
at
I
the end of
guess
the class.
your turn for
Good,
party ender.
good way to end the class. Yeah,
Yes,
it's like one of those club let out songs. That's
it
what I
is.
think of it as. But yeah. So let me ask this: Jagged Edge or 112?
I would say for me, Jagged Edge.
Perfect
Yes.
answer.
It was Me Be at the Altar, all those songs. Those, yeah, I remember
Yeah.
them.
I think Jagged Edge blows I think 112 had
Mhm.
had a higher peak, but Jagged Edge was way more
Yeah.
consistent.
So when
Way
their
more
song come on, you
consistent.
know it's Jagged Edge. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So now it's time of the podcast where I turn the mic over to you
Mhm.
to ask me any questions that you want to know.
Sure. So I think even in the podcast, I learned things, and of course, I've known you for a certain amount of years, through friends, things like that. So, but me learning just through this podcast that you were an amputee at an early age. Do you think that had anything to do with why you got into the field? I know you said that that's a traumatic moment at an early age that chose the path that you're taking on now.
Yeah, definitely. Like, they don't know the cause of bipolar disorder, but I believe it is a combination of events as well as brain
Mhm.
chemistry. Um, there's pretty much the scientists think it's a combination of those things that happen there. And I think what happened for me is that event kind of fractured my brain some. Then as I got older, the brain chemistry was just like, well, this is what's going to happen. I think it's hereditary. I'm not going to say who my family has
Yeah.
it, but if you're my family, we can have a educated guess who. Um,
I understand that.
but I I think it's a combination of the event that happened and my hereditary.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm also I was saying more so like you choosing the field that you're in as far as your work and things. Did that influence like from your upbringing?
Oh, definitely. I think between mental health and working with students,
Mhm.
definitely I always wanted to give back. I see myself as someone who just always just gave back even at a young age. And like even going to college, I mentor students, middle school, I helped other students, high school, same
Awesome.
thing, just always gave back.
Excellent. Excellent. So and I see the same thing for myself. I think that, even being someone who was so hypersensitive to so much that was going on because of me not knowing how ADHD affected me. Now I have made it intent to be someone that I needed, in my earlier
Mhm.
years. What are some other ways, even outside of mental health, that you give back um, to the community, and like even what community is important to you to give back?
I would say just the disability community in general
Mhm.
is important to me, as well as the Black community. Both those communities, I give back. I mentor students. Especially first generation students. When I was in Richmond, I worked with middle school students at Henderson Middle School. Shout out to Henderson Middle School. I know, yeah, that was a fun time there.
Nice.
Before I started my PhD program, I worked with those students. But to me, it's just I think mentorship is really important to me, and just any opportunity I can to mentor people or mentor students or become someone's mentee, I look forward to that.
Nice. And so I don't think I shared before about well, you reminded me once you said that you give back to more of the disabled community. So the crisis system that I work with is the developmentally disabled population. And I really do have a passion for them because their crises look different than most people who experience crises, whether it's, a mental imbalance or whatnot. It's more so along the lines of behavioral. And a lot of times people who have different levels of intellectual disability, developmental disabilities, autism, things like that, a lot of times they're trying to communicate something that the average person who wouldn't have that understanding can't articulate. And so a lot of times we're building systems around them, especially if they're quote unquote nonverbal, systems around them so that they can be able to communicate just like you and I would in our everyday lives and have as close of a quote unquote, I hate the word normal life as possible, but normal is being so much what's normal to them. What would their preferences and things be? So that's a big passion of mine as well. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Man, it's so many questions I guess I could ask, because especially being in this building, us talking and knowing there's so much beyond just ADHD, anxiety, bipolar that we see on a day-to-day basis. Is there any specific diagnoses that you've, that of course you work with all of them, but that you have more of a focus on or passion for?
So my dissertation was on bipolar disorder, but as far as like a side project, or not a side project, but as a podcast project, I would love to speak to someone with Alzheimer's, dementia, or schizophrenia. I think those ones are of interest to me, just because I think those are very misunderstood. And quite frankly, there's a lot of Alzheimer's, dementia in my family. So I would love to speak to someone who understands that more. And honestly, at this point, someone with OCD, because if my therapist, psychiatrist is like, this is what you have, I want to know what it is, because I'm ignorant to it, and I just want to know, what does it actually look like?
Yeah, I get.
So if you have OCD, you want to be on a podcast, my information's in the outro, so hit me up.
Nice. Well, I think other than that, I think that's all the questions I have for you. But I will give a plug too, link you with people with similar interest or similar things, journeys in life. I'm very big on the Facebook groups, and you can type anything into the search bar and click on the group section of Facebook and find people with those same interests. And there's discussions for days that you can go into. And I love just reading those and hearing about people's and their experiences. And for me, when I first found out about ADHD, and I've been in some of the ADHD groups forever, and knowing how women present differently than men, and man, I didn't know that. So it's a lot of just real time updates that I think is amazing. So even for OCD, you can find a group on that and meet people, and then you present your podcast to them. And I'm sure you will find someone who'd be interested to share.
Definitely. That is definitely an option that I will look into. I had no idea.
Oh, man.
Did not think about that.
I'm big on Facebook groups.
Yeah. I need to get on Facebook. But thank you, Richard. We greatly appreciate you being on this show. So we appreciate it a lot.
No problem, man. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed this dialogue. It didn't even feel like, I think it's been on for an hour. It felt like minutes. So this is great.
It did. It went by really quick.
Exactly.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for tending to the garden with me today. Seriously, just remember, stability isn't a straight line. It's a rhythm. Just because the music slows down for a second, it doesn't mean the song is over. Give yourself some radical grace this week. If this conversation brought a little bit of light into your space, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening. Share this with someone who needs it, and come lock in with us on Instagram at Black and Diagnosed. I'm always looking to build connections, so if you want to jump on a guest spot or have a collaboration in mind, hit my email at info@gerronscott.com. Let's build. Till next time, take care of yourselves.